You wanna go, you wanna leave. So baby, come and get away with me. You wanna go.
So me and Hank talked, and she's getting ready to head back to Wichita, Kansas, because we put everything together. You know, she was going to go down there, work aircraft, and possibly stay with her friend for a little bit and maybe buy a little rental property, you know, instead of renting an apartment. So that's pretty much what we talked about. And at this time, my son's in Utah, you know, so I'm not even getting to see him that much at the time. So we're going through everything, talking about everything, stuff like that. So during this time, my Uncle Daniel kind of had a scare. He went into the hospital and they scanned him and they said that he had a spot on his liver. So he was all like scared and stuff, like, oh man, it could be cancer and everything. So they end up taking a piece out of his liver and studying it, and they said it was cancer. And my uncle, he was down and out and just like, oh man. And you know, he thought like it might have been from all the years of drinking, because he's drinking a lot of alcohol over the years. And so he's down and out and everything like that, thinking like, man, this is it, you know. So I think a few more days goes by, and then the doctor calls him back and says, we made a mistake. We thought it was cancer, but it's benign, it's not cancer. And so he's happy, he's excited, and after he heard that good news, he cracked open a beer with a couple of us, and you know, was all excited that he didn't have cancer. And so time goes on. And so as time goes on, I think about 2 or 3 more weeks, or maybe even a month goes by, and he starts having like issues where he's throwing up blood or just like a lot of symptoms. So he goes into the doctor and they tell him that he has internal bleeding and all this other stuff, and he gets hospitalized. And it's just like, man, one minute he's, you know, all happy because nothing's wrong with him, the next minute he's getting put back in the hospital, you know, because he has internal bleeding. And so he goes into the hospital because of his internal bleeding, and they're just talking with him like, you know, like trying to stop this internal bleeding, and we're trying to figure out what's going on with him, what's what. They admitted him to a hospital for a few days, and then another like care facility somewhere. And we're just dealing with all this, you know. And then he even went down to like Colorado to see some specialists and just all kinds of stuff. And he's starting to lose weight, and you know, it's real messed up. So right around this time that he's going through all this, Hank goes ahead and she goes back to Wichita, you know, because that was her plan, you know, go back to Wichita. And she told me, she says, you know, if you follow me, then I know that you want to pursue a relationship with me. And I was falling in love with her a lot, you know, and I wanted a relationship with her. So, you know, that's what I was planning on doing anyways. So she went ahead and went up there and started getting everything together, started working for that company. And she was staying at her friend's house for a little while so she could look for a house to buy and get things situated. Well, at the time she's over there in Wichita, Kansas, my uncle's going through all this drama, you know, and it's real crazy. So my uncle's going through all this drama and everything, and it's a mess. And at the same time he's going through all this drama, I'm welding at a power plant in Wheatland, Wyoming. And they took a liking to me in Wheatland, Wyoming. You know, after the turnaround, when I first got there, we was on a turnaround to 712s. And after the turnaround was going on, they took a real liking to me. My boss asked me if I would be interested in staying for 40-hour work weeks, and so I did, you know. And so I was there almost like a year now, you know, because I went there in May of 2013, and then it's already like April of 2014 now, or something right around that area. And so my boss really likes me, a lot of people really like me. So before because they have a turnaround once a year where they work like probably a month or 2 months on 7-12 hour schedule, you know, so everybody's working a lot of overtime to get a bunch of work done. Because what they do during that turnaround is they shut down some of the equipment and they do maintenance on it, you know. And so before the next turnaround is coming up, you know, my boss is asking me if I'm interested in being a foreman on a job. And I told him, yeah, you know, no big deal. I've done foreman work in the past, so it was really nothing new to me at the time. And so I said yes. So I'm a foreman on this job down in Wheatland, Wyoming, and I just started staying in Wheatland, Wyoming because it's 70 miles away from Cheyenne. So, you know, that way I'm close to work and I can be there early every day and put in my 12-hour shift, 12.5-hour shift. And at this time I'm being a foreman on the job, you know, that's when everything starts going downhill with my Uncle Daniel. He gets admitted back to the hospital, it's just a mess. And I think I went back to see him a couple times, but at this time I was living in Wheatland, Wyoming for the turnaround, just renting like a little apartment and, you know, trying to stay in Wheatland, Wyoming. But sometimes I'd go back and see my Uncle Daniel because he was real sick, you know, he's in real bad shape. And this one night my mom called me and she says, I don't know if Uncle Daniel's gonna make it through the night, you know, he's bleeding heavily. And they're just they have him sedated and they're just trying to stop the bleeding. And you know, I was thinking about it, I was like, man, should I drive back there, see my uncle, because it sounds like pretty crazy, or should I stay up here? And I was going through all this in my mind, you know, like, man, what should I do? Because my uncle's very close to me and I wanted to go spend time with him, because this might be it, you know, he might pass away or, you know, whatever. And so I was real tired, just dealing with a lot of stuff, and I decided not to go that night. Well, in the morning my mom called me and she told me that he ended up passing away, you know. It was either in the morning or late that night. She told me that he passed away. And I felt really bad, you know, because I wanted to be there with him. You know, I love my uncle and everything like that, but, you know, that's life. Sometimes we make decisions and we look at it like, man, I should have been there for him, but, you know, that's life. I wish I could have, but I wasn't. But so he ended up passing away. He ended up dying. And so we had to set up a funeral and everything for him. And at this time, I'm still the foreman on this job. So I take off time on this job, and we go to his funeral, and, you know, another family member. So at this time, I've already lost 3 of my uncles. You know, first is my Uncle Ronnie, then my Uncle Talleray, now my Uncle Daniel, and I only have one left, my Uncle Gary. And my grandpa, he already passed away too, so it's like we're losing a lot of family members, you know. And so we do his funeral and everything like that. Well, my uncle didn't have no life insurance. He didn't have, like, hardly any money. He was struggling. And so it's like, well, who's going to pay for his funeral? So what we decided to do is, like, all the family members would pitch in some money, you know, to help with his funeral, because that's all you can really do when one of your family members dies and there's nothing to cover it, you know. So we all pitched in and helped pay for his funeral, you know. And so this is a real hard point in my life, dealing with the death of my uncle. And so after that all happens, and, you know, try to heal the best we can. I think it's like another month or so, and, you know, I was planning on leaving. You know, I was planning on moving up to Wichita, Kansas, because my son was in Utah, you know, and Hang was already up in Wichita, and I didn't have nothing really going on. So I ended up scheduling a U-Haul, and I packed up my whole house and everything like that. And this is right around maybe May 10th or something like that. And our plan was that I would buy a plane ticket for Hang, and she would fly down, and she would drive my truck behind the U-Haul and follow me all the way back to Wichita, you know, kind of deal. So that's what happened. That's what she did. Well, during the time I'm moving all my stuff and packing it into the U-Haul, my ex calls and says it didn't work out in Utah and they're back and all this other stuff. And so she asked me if I want to see my son. Well, of course I want to see him. So we spent time with each other for a few days or so while I was packing the house and getting ready to leave to Wichita. And it's real weird, but because I didn't want to leave my son, but it's like, well, what do you do, So we load up the truck and everything. We start heading back to Wichita. And there again, I'm starting having the same thoughts of like, did I do the right thing? My son's back and I'm leaving again, but it's like, what do you do? They were in Utah and this is what we decided. So before I moved to Wichita, I called the union up in Wichita, Kansas, local 441, and asked them if they would have any work available for me. And they says, oh yeah, since you got some welding certs and everything like that, we could put you right to work. Just go ahead and come on down and we'll put you to work when you're ready. So in my mind, thinking of it, I was going to drive down to Wichita and maybe take a week off, help unpack the house, get settled in, because Hang was she bought a little house already, and she was living in there like a few weeks or something. She didn't have no furniture because she was waiting for me to bring all the furniture. And so I was going to unpack the house and take a week off, and my plans was to work for the union throughout the whole summer. And my son was going to come down and visit me during the summer. And then as soon as he'd leave, then I would start looking around for welding inspection jobs while I'm working at the union. Because that's what my goal really was to do, was to be a welding inspector. And so that was my plan. And that way I could spend some time with my son, while I'm still working and everything else. Well, when I get down there, my friend David's still living up here in Wichita, and him and his family come over, help us unpack and everything like that, go through the motions. And we're in this little house, and it's not bad, it's a nice little house, I can't complain. And so a week goes by, and I'm still in contact with the union and everything, and I call them up and say, hey, can you guys put me to work? What's going on? And they says, well, come on down. They had me come on down and sign out all kinds of paperwork, and then they says, well, we know you have a welding cert and everything, but we really don't know you down here, and you're a traveler from a different union, so it's going to be kind of hard to get you out of the works, but we'll put you on the list and we'll see what happens. They says, and you also might want to start practicing so you get another welding cert. So I was like, okay, great. Well, it is what it is, So I was down to Wichita in May, and all I could do was practice welding, here and there, And so I'm practicing welding and everything like that, and checking every week for work, and they're just telling me, oh, we ain't got no work, not, call us back next week. And so I called them like every week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week for like 2 or 3 months straight. And it's just getting ridiculous, It's just like, and they're telling me the same story every week. Oh, we ain't got no work, you're from a different union, we don't know you, this and that. And I was just like, great. So I'm just going through the motions. And then my son, he finally comes down for the summer. I think I went and picked him up or something, and he spends the whole summer with us. And so, like, I'm not working at the time, and I'm just calling the union and putting in job applications for welding inspection and welder and just everything I can, because I'm trying to find a job now. It's already been like 3 months since I've been down there, so I'm trying to find a job. And at this time, my self-esteem starts dipping. I'm just thinking to myself, like, I was making money, before. Now I'm down here looking for a job. I ain't got nothing, and man, what's life all about? So during this whole time, I'm looking for a job. Pretty much that's what I'm trying to do. And so finally I get an interview, and this is like 5 months after I've been down there. And finally I get an interview with 2 different companies. One was called Cargill for a pipe fitter, and the other one was a welding inspector for a company called Red Guard. And the thing was is they want to schedule the interview on the same day. So I did it. So I went and took both those interviews. I went and talked to Cargill first, and then the other interview was scheduled like about an hour or so later. While I was at Cargill, they had a certain price that they were capping out at, that they were willing to pay me. And I just talked with them and says, you know, can I be really blunt with you guys and really explain? And they said, sure, we're open to anything, you know. So I explained that they would probably have to increase that top out pay to a higher pay just to get any good quality journeyman in there. And I compared their top out pay with what the union in Wichita was paying their journeyman pipe fitters and welders. And so they understood, you know, they completely understood, and we had a good meeting, interview, and everything like that, and that was it. And I went over to Red Guard and done that interview also. And that one went really well also. And they asked me what I was willing to start out with, and we talked through all that. So after I left those interviews, you know, some time goes on, and I think about another week or so goes on. And right after I had the second interview with Red Guard, my mom come down to visit me, her and Calvin, and me and Hang were planning on getting married. So we ended up getting married while my son was down in Wichita, Kansas. And my mom and Calvin drove up to see it and to be there with us. And so me and Hang ended up getting married, you know, and everything's falling together, and it's just like I just got to find a job kind of deal. And my son, he gets along great with Hang, she gets along great with him, so everything's perfect, you know, everything's fine, you know. And so after the marriage and then after that interview, like almost 2 days go by, and then my son has to go back to Wyoming to get ready for school. So my mom takes my son back to Wyoming to get ready for school. And so I'm waiting just to hear back on these interviews. And finally, Cargill calls me first, and it was like a week or so after both interviews. They called me and they says, "Oh, we like your like what you were telling us about how we need some more money, and we totally understand, and we're trying to get that approved through HR, you know, because we would really like to hire you and bring you on." And I says, "Okay, sounds great." And so I got off the phone with them. About 30 minutes later, Red Guard calls me up, and then they offer me the job as a welding inspector. And that's what I wanted to do, was be a welding inspector. Well, you know, I'm certified welding inspector. I have my CWI, and I learned all the educational stuff, all the code book stuff, but I really don't know how to be a welding inspector. You know, so it's like a new field, a new area that I'm trying to venture into. And so, you know, but that's my dreams and my goals at this time, was to become a welding inspector. So I accepted the job and everything like that, and I was real happy, I was real excited, the money was good, everything. And I called back Cargill at the same time and told them, you know, thanks for hanging on, thanks for contacting me, but I accepted the offer with another company. And so that's what happened, you know. And then I started just, you know, going to work for Red Guard, going through all those motions and everything, and I'm totally excited because I'm getting into a new area and I'm starting to learn new stuff, you know, and that's what I wanted to do. Well, Red Guard at the time, they built blast-resistant buildings for petrochemical and refineries and all kinds of different places, even sometimes the military. And it's just like an office building or something that you would put in a refinery or some area, and it's blast proof up to a certain extent, you know, that's how they would design them. And they would manufacture all these buildings, but they would call in inspectors from different companies to come in and inspect these buildings. Well, they thought at the time that it'd be really beneficial to hire their own welding inspector. And so that's what they end up doing. So I was their first in-house welding inspector before they used to outsource it all and hire other inspectors. And so I'm getting into this position and I'm working with other inspectors, but they're not welding inspectors, they're just quality control, you know. And they all have pretty good experience, pretty good background, and I'm fairly new to all this, you know. So before we get started, you know, on this next one, we're gonna have to take a break and come back. You know, but I'm going to keep on with my story, guys. Just stick with me. Go ahead and subscribe down below if you haven't, you know, just to help me out and so I can keep this channel rolling. Hit the bell icon, you know, that way you'll be notified. If you have any comments or whatever, drop them in the comment box. If you want to know certain details, if anything, drop them in the comment box, you know, and we'll try to make another video on that. You know, in my testimony, I'm just skimming the top of it, and a lot of stuff has happened, but I'm not really digging into the meat of it just for time's sake. You know, I don't want to be here forever, but if there's any other details you want to know about, just drop them in the comment box, you know, just let me know. So I'll be back and I'll catch you on the next one, guys. See ya.